Hello and welcome to the show. I am your host, Terry Ann Russell. On Sacred Wellness, we honor the power of healing and awakening while we dive deep into what matters and what it means to rise from the deepest challenges of life and reclaim our wholeness, mind, body, soul, and purpose. Today, I'm excited to welcome Stephanie as our guest. Welcome to the show, Stephanie.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited for our conversation today.
Me too. I was reading your bio and I think it's so awesome. I mean, I am totally a book person. I still have, hundreds of physical copies of books. I really don't like the online yet, but I do have a couple. They're trying to move me over, but we'll see if that works. I want to talk a little bit today about your journey, what you do, and I want to know in your words if you can explain restorative writing and reading and why it's the underdog of health and wellness for us today.
So to answer that question, I'm going to take you back a couple of years, actually a lot of years. I've always been a voracious reader and writer. I've always loved books. I've always found comfort in having a notebook and a pencil close by just in case I need to write some things down. And that started in childhood. It was my favorite thing to do. It was the way I passed the time. But when I was a teenager, 13 years old, I realized that reading and writing were more than just hobbies. They were things that made me feel better. So I became quite sick as a 13-year-old. And back then, no one quite knew what was going on. So I was traveling from, doctor to doctor and hospital to hospital. I was out of school for many years. I was bedridden for multiple. And the only things I had to comfort me were books and notebooks because I literally could not get out of bed. I really could not do much else. And I knew, even though I didn't know why, that would come later. I knew that when I read and when I wrote the old-fashioned way in a notebook with a pencil, I felt better. And I used reading and writing to pass the time. I used it to escape the current reality I was in. I used it to plan and dream, what my teenage life might look like once I got out of bed. And books and notebooks really became my friends, and they became the tools that actually helped me get well. So it was a book that someone dropped off, and everybody knew that I was a voracious reader. So people just dropped off books because they knew that was all I could do. And there was a book in one of the boxes that was an adult like health and wellness book. And I read it and I found something in there that just sounded like me. And that led my mother and I to that doctor, that line of thinking, which worked. I got on a new protocol. I got a new doctor. I got well. And I really credit reading and writing to helping me feel better in the moment, and that book as being the domino that helped me move into the direction that I needed to go in. So life got really good. I followed that love of reading and writing. I became a teacher, a reading teacher, a reading coach, and what I do today, which is a teacher educator, I help other teachers who want to spread their love of reading with others. But then COVID came. COVID came, life turned upside down, and that same illness that I struggled with for so long as a child came back in a slightly new way in my early 40s. And I thought, oh no, like here we go again, but no, no. And I again made the circuit to the doctors and did all the trips and all of the things, and finally just said, what helped back then? Well, it was reading and it was
Yeah.
writing. And so I dove back into the reading and writing life that had been abandoned for all of the things that COVID brought in terms of work and stress. And this time, though, armed with a PhD in education, I wanted to know why. Why
Mm.
was reading and writing the thing that made me feel better? No one else was talking about this, but why was it the only thing that seemed to lead me to feeling better? And so in the last couple of years, I really dove into the research. And there's so much that I intuitively knew as a kid that I now know scientifically as an adult that reading and writing is good for your health. Reading and writing are good for your immunity. They are good for the levels of inflammation in your body. They're good for your breathing rate, your blood pressure, your sleeping, your mental health, the levels of depression, anxiety, serotonin, cortisol, all of it.
Yeah.
And I've made it my mission to help others realize that these tools that are very cheap, potentially free if you have a library card and a few minutes, can be the thing that can help you feel better in the moment from whatever you want to feel better from. But also, if we are reading particular books and reading and writing in particular ways, those books could be the dominoes that fall that lead you to the thing that makes life better at the same time. And
Yeah.
so I needed a name for this really big work that I felt like I was doing, and I simply call it restorative reading and writing, the kind of reading and writing that we do to make us feel better and to grow through whatever it is we're going through and just have the kind of life we want to have. I think books and notebooks are definitely the underdog in this kind of thinking.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's my hope to just share with as many people as I can that these two tools could be the thing that could help you too. Just
Yeah.
really long explanation.
I love that so much because so much has gone on in my life. And I love that you share because I truly believe there are no coincidences and that someone just dropped that book there and you just happened to read it. And it was something at that age that you were like, oh, this may be interesting. I don't think people give credit enough to the things we don't see, know, hear, feel. And
Yes.
sometimes it is just a book. It is just a sentence that we come across that says to us, hey, you need to open your eyes to this and look into what it is. And so I love that you shared that also. I also had a sick daughter, and so I know how important it is to be able to be open to other realms of possibilities when it comes to healing because there's so much and it wasn't talked about, right? It
Right.
wasn't something that somebody say, oh, go read and write and this will make you feel better. So I love that you share all that today. I want to talk a little bit about, you mentioned about what you're writing and what you're reading. And so what types of things would you recommend for somebody that is starting this restorative writing and reading process?
Well, I wish I had, well, actually, I don't wish that I had one title because the really wonderful nature of restorative reading and writing is that it is unique to each person. And so I like to ask people to think about three things. Who do you want to be? How do you want to feel? And what do you want to do? And then choose books that help you be, feel, and do those things so that your reading and writing life is very intentional. It feels really good and it feels like it's moving you in whatever direction you want to go. So, the great thing about the science behind this work is that it doesn't actually matter what you read and write.
Hmm.
As long as you read and write, you will get the health benefits that come with it. So, just 6 minutes of reading anything left to right, return sweep, left to right, return sweep, left to right, left to right, left to right. It's that left to right movement of our eyes that literally lulls our nervous system into a more relaxed state. And research shows it only takes 6 minutes to get there. In terms of writing,
Hmm.
just one 15-minute session can be enough to lower the amount of stress in your body. A 15-minute session 3 days in a row has lasting effects months later, according to the research. So it doesn't really matter what you read and what you write. But if you really want to lean into that idea of restorative practices, then that be, do, and feel framework comes into play because the brain is this really cool and really complicated thing that does two things related to the restorative reading and writing space. Number one, it releases chemicals. So just 30 to 60 minutes, I'm sorry, 30 to 60 seconds of a thought in our head releases a matching chemical. Think stressful thoughts, get stressful cortisol. Think
Yes.
happy thoughts, get serotonin, get dopamine. And research shows that the books that we read and the ways that we feel when we write can trigger those same chemicals. So, reading books that are going to make you feel good, that are going to make whatever you like in your reading life happy, is important. writing things on the page that will help you either let go of what you need to let go of or embrace a more gratitude state
Hmm.
will support that. So it's not that I don't want you to go read the latest murder mystery or whatever Reese, and Oprah say that we should read, but a restorative reading and writing practice really does have you think about what you want out of your own life so that your reading can actually help you get there.
Right. That makes total sense. I have my associate's degree in psychology and my bachelor's in human services, and there's so much that I learned about the brain and the power of the brain and how when we're reading, we're actually working both sides of our brain, right? We're reading, but we're also visualizing. And so both sides of our brain are receiving that information. And so having that, knowledge is so powerful, and that you're sharing that today is beautiful. What if somebody doesn't like to read? Because I know I'm a voracious reader also, but I know plenty of people who do not want to read. I know you said it doesn't take long to sort of do it, but what kind of, should they look for books maybe that would more interest them, right? Something that maybe it is a murder mystery to start, but then they get into it and start writing. Um, and someone's engaging with that, because a lot of what I talk about today is this feminine space, and you create this space for women to sort of work in this space alone. Do you find that you come across people that totally do not like to read or write?
Well, the people that find me usually already like to read and write because they are connecting with the messages that I'm spreading, which is we can give permission to ourselves to read and write more so that we feel
Mhm.
better. So I think more often than not, the people that find me truly love to read and write already and are ready to take the next step. But as a teacher educator, I work with all sorts of people. I work with all sorts of kids, and kids are quite eager to come up to me and say, well, I don't like to read. I hate to read, right? And I usually say to adults the same thing I say to kids, which is, you just haven't found the right book yet. And don't worry, it is waiting patiently for you. Now, it is more complicated, of course, with
Right.
adults. There are so many factors. I think for adults, just giving ourselves permission to, in quotes, just read or just write without any kind of productivity attached to it, without checking something off of our box. It's really hard for adults to just give ourselves that time and self-care to just be and not do. And reading and writing means you have to give yourself time to just be and not do. So a lot of the times, I think adults block may not be that they dislike reading and writing so much, but it is just so hard for them to decompress and to slow
And it's
down.
probably tied to their belief system. If you grew up hearing, that's not productive, you should be doing something
Yeah.
productive, get out there and work, get out there and hustle. And you're
Yeah.
like, well, I just want to go read a book. And so as a child, often we have these beliefs thrown onto us. And then as we grow up, we believe them,
Yeah.
obviously, So sitting, you said it, you hit the nail on the head, sitting around reading and writing is in our belief system, maybe not as productive as we could be being. But I think when you're moving into that feminine space, and a lot of what I speak today is the feminine space. And because I grew up so masculine, in a masculine world, a masculine domination, the feminine space, so coming into that being versus the doing, right? We have the two sides, and learning what that balance means. But I want to know for you, when you work with women, and what does it mean for you to hold space in that? Because when we're holding space for somebody else, we have to be able to hold space for ourselves, right? So the work you do with yourself, can you tell me a little bit about what you receive on that receiving end of the work you're doing with somebody else?
That right there is everything. That statement that you just said is everything. And it was something that I had to learn, I think, of course, too. Because I got so busy in the beginning wanting to share this message and get it out to as many people as I could so that they could feel better like I did, that my own reading and writing life took a hit. And I thought, okay, this isn't working. This isn't how it's supposed to be. Um, so
And is
for me,
that when you got sick again during COVID?
um, I got sick during COVID. Not necessarily, well, yes, at that point, my reading and writing had definitely taken a hit. But this was even after, once I was sharing this message with others, it just became really easy for me to get back into that doing, make that post, do that podcast, put that Substack out, that my own reading and writing felt very stilted and very rushed.
Mm.
So I work really hard now to put myself in the space of others who remind me that the work that we do, kind of holding space and leading others to this place means, we can only bring other people as far as we are able to go ourselves. And
I
so
love
it's
that.
that constant reminder that I get permission to do this too. It's putting myself in the communities of others who are also doing this work, giving them that permission. I also get coaching myself around my own expressive writing. I
Yes.
continue to
Hmm.
train in bibliotherapy, which is kind of the term that the rest of the world uses for restorative reading and writing. I tend not to say bibliotherapy, even though it is what I'm doing, because when I say that, people think I am a therapist.
Mm.
And so I want to distinguish between someone who believes that you can unlock things for yourself with reading and writing versus someone who's a therapist who's trained to work through your particular issues.
Yes.
Um, but I continue my training in that area as well. So it's just reminding ourselves that we truly are all in it together. And
Yes.
that while I may be further along in the journey of figuring out this whole reading and writing thing, someone else is further in the other 17 areas of my life that I need support in. And it just is this beautiful dance all the time.
I find that as well. And doing the podcast is one of the things I love the most. I get to meet such a variety of different people from different backgrounds, but we're all giving and receiving in that same space. And I think that's why I love the podcast so much. But I want to know from you, like, what signs? Because I know when I'm working with clients, there's specific things that they start to do when they're starting to shift through something. Well, is there something in particular that maybe that someone does and you're like, oh, they're getting it?
There is. And I have a framework that I use. I created it as part of one of my books that I've written for teachers, and it's the Habits, Hearts, and Communities framework. And when I hear people talking about how their habits are shifting, or how they're approaching their reading and writing, the nudges they're getting, the messages that they're listening for, or when they reach out to someone else in a community or share what they're doing with others. I find that those signs of growth are typically in those three areas. It's either their habits are growing, their hearts in terms of what they're reading and writing is growing, or they're willing to talk about it and make that learning public, which is exciting. I think the other thing though that I love to see is when they start to question what they're doing and their practices of like,
Yes.
well, why do I want that book right now? Is what is that message? One of my favorite things to work with people on are their reading rules or even their writing rules, depending on what they come to me for. And so, as readers, we may have rules that we don't even consciously think of, like you can never dog ear, a page of a book, that you can't do that, or you can't abandon a book. You have to read it, until the end. Or maybe your rule is I always have 5 books that I'm reading because I hop around to them. And so I'll have people talk about their reading rules and I'll say, okay,
Mhm.
how does the core belief of that reading rule show up in your actual life? You can't dog ear that page. Is there a little perfectionism in there that perhaps
You
things have to
think?
be perfect? Or you can't stop reading a book that isn't serving you, that you don't like. Do you hold on to things a little bit longer than perhaps is useful for you in your actual life? And so when people come to me and they start questioning the things that they're doing as a reader and writer, I know that next step is going to be perhaps questioning the ways that those rules show up in their actual life. And that's a really fun moment for me.
Yeah, I could totally see that. That it totally makes sense what you're saying. I want to talk a little bit about your podcast.
Yes.
And so I was reading a little bit up on you, researching before we met today, and I heard you say something that you don't really like social media, and so that part is more difficult for you, which I think when you're very intuitive also, you find it harder to do those as you're moving more into that feminine way of being, you're finding it more difficult to be in that masculine doing the wording you use and stuff like that. So the podcast requires you to sort of be in a masculine space, right? Because you have to create, you have to edit, you have to do all of these lists of things, right, to get them done. But what type of intentions? Because when I met with you today and when I meet with all of my guests, I do a little intention ritual that I like to do, and I set the highest intention for both of us to come through for our show today. Is there any type of intentions that you do that you carry with you before you create an episode?
Honestly, the podcast is a reflection of my actual reading life, my writing life, and my actual life that I just feel compelled to share.
Mhm.
So I like to have somewhat of a so-called master plan where I may have a very loose outline of what I'm going to share. It's always
Mhm.
related to how reading and writing can help us feel better. But I have found that the podcast really is a space for me to experiment and to grow and to share. Now, when I first started the podcast, it was not where and what it is today. It had to be the right way, in the same way, in the same ritual, and I had to do this and as you said, the
I
21
get it.
things that you have to do when it relates to a podcast. And
Hmm.
as I got more comfortable, as I started growing, as I continued my own journey, I realized that this podcast not only is a space for me to share things with others, but it holds me accountable in my own growth. And so the episodes really are just me trying to be my best self in this area so that I can help just one, just one person
Yeah.
realize that this book could be the thing that unlocks X, Y, or Z for me. Or I didn't realize that the chronic pain that I'm in can be alleviated on the page, but listening to my episode on that could. And so it's I think my intention is to just show up very real
Hmm.
and sometimes say things I can't believe that I say and on a podcast about how my life is going. But I know as a listener, that's what I appreciate when someone talks about
Yes.
the things that are good, but the things that are hard and the things that are
Yeah.
challenging and the things that helped. And so I would say my intention is just to show up truly as me in the moment and receive, give that way, but then receive. I love getting the energy back, right? Of people that
Yeah.
write to you or comment in some way. Social media is not my favorite, but it is a vehicle for connection. So I do try to look at it that way rather than getting overwhelmed with the how many times should a podcaster post and what should they post about kind of
No, I agree. And it's funny you say that because, I get people that say to me, and I'm like, I don't want to do this show today, or it's a show that I'm just speaking about my own life and what I'm going through. And it's like, do I really want to share this? But then I share it, and then so many people reach out and they're like, thank you for sharing that. I didn't know, it gave me a new perspective to look at it a different way. And so often, and I'm like, that was the worst show I ever did. I should just delete it. But that's up in my head. My ego is talking. And often those are some of the best shows is where you just show up and you're vulnerable and you're raw about your life and what you're doing. Because I always share on my podcast that we're not perfect. We're not coming at you from this standpoint that we have all the answers, we did it all, and we're living this perfect life because that's not the way it is. I'm still learning and growing every day, and I will until I leave this earth. So I think being able to share and show up as who you are that day is so powerful for the people that you're showing up for. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a great conversation. I want you to just, before we end, if you could whisper something to one person that's out there, because I use that line often as well. If I can help one person through my books or through my podcast, then I've done my job. If you can just whisper something, what would you invite them to hear you say today?
I would love to invite them to give themselves permission to read and to write as something that they deserve and do not have to wait for when their work is done. They do not have to put off because it is not productive. I'd love for them to give themselves permission to explore these two practices as something very worthwhile to their health, their wellness, their self-care, and how they show up in the world by just giving themselves the space to explore.
I love that. I love that. I truly love that. And where can my listeners find you?
Well, I have a website at alitlife.com, and there is everything. So you could find the Restorative Reading and Writing for Wellness podcast. You could also find my other podcast. I podcast on children's literature because I feel like we are all inner children and all adults should still read children's literature. And there's also information on there about the courses and the coaching that I do. But I would love to plug one free project that
Sure.
I have been sharing that is just bringing me so much joy. So I designed and created these postcards that look like old-fashioned library cards, the ones that some of us might remember tucked into the library pocket at the back of the book
I
before
do.
you
I'm
checked
that
out.
old.
Yeah, before you checked out your books in the scanner. And so I have a very simple Google form that if you are willing to share your name, a little bit about your reading life and what you're after in your actual life, along with your snail mail address, so your good old-fashioned postal mailbox. I handwrite a book recommendation based on what you share and what I know about books. I handwrite that on the first side of it that looks like
Mhm.
a library card entry, and on the back, just a short note of encouragement from me, usually with a sticker, because everybody needs a sticker to brighten their day. And it's just something different than the bills and the junk mail that come through. And it's my hope that offering that one book recommendation could be the thing that, gets people into this work and gets them excited about it and could be the one book that ends up changing everything.
Well, I love that, and I'm definitely going to do it because I love to receive mail, and I don't get
Good.
much mail anymore. So that would
I will
make
send
my
you the link for
day.
sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Stephanie, it's been a pleasure. I'm so grateful for the work that you do, and thank you for sharing with us today. And I will be back next week with another exciting guest, and we'll catch you then.